This is Conversations on Careers and Professional Life, a podcast from the Foster School of Business, MBA Career Management Office. I'm your host, Gregory Heller. On each episode, I talk with guests from faculty and staff to students and business leaders about the skills and strategies that can help you design a professional life that you're happy with. On this episode, I speak with style consultant Audrey Beaulac. Audrey has been working with our students for quite a few years now. She'll come in and hold one-on-one style consulting sessions a few times a year, as well as provide some other programming to our students about developing a signature style that works for them and the careers they're pursuing. The last time I had Audrey on the podcast was in March of 2019. The pandemic and 18 months of working from home has certainly changed some style norms, so I thought it would be a great time to bring Audrey back and ask her about those changes, especially as many of us are getting ready to head back into the office, at least some of the time. I'll put a link in the show notes for episode 10 of season 1 if you want to go back and listen to that first conversation, which still contains some great advice. Before we get to the conversation, let me ask you a favor. Whether this is the first episode you've listened to or the 40th, would you take a few moments to answer a short survey at conversationsoncareers.com/survey? Thanks. I hope you'll enjoy this conversation on careers and professional life with Audrey Beaulac. Audrey Beaulac, welcome back to Conversations on Careers and Professional Life.
Well, thank you, Gregory. It's a pleasure to be back. A lot has changed in the last year since when we talked in 19, it seems so different now.
Yeah. So I imagine a lot of styling from the waist up has been going on over the last 18 months.
Yes. And we all learned it together. So that's one thing that we have is that we have a community effort of coping with this. And now that we're a little further down the road, we need to start putting our own signature on it.
Yes. And some people are starting to head back into the workplace. Our students this fall will be on campus once again, and many of our recent graduates are entering the workplace either through a hybrid work environment or still some work from home or back full time. So I'd love to hear your thoughts as we enter the fall of 2021. What are you thinking about style?
Yeah, it's such a good question because one of the things is that we're all involved in a big change, and whether it's by our choice or not, it's happening. So in terms of styling, what's happened is after everyone stayed home for a year or such, whatever accommodations they did, we got used to being in very comfortable clothing in terms of stretch and movement orientation. Plus, we got kind of used to not having to be fully dressed to be in meetings. We could still wear pajama bottoms and keep everything from the waist up. So I think what it's done in a hybrid situation is that we're going to see a softer, more comfortable fit at work. People aren't necessarily going to head back into suiting as we knew it prior to the pandemic. It's going to become much more comfort oriented. I would say jackets are going to get softer. Probably women are going to go for more dresses just because of the ease of them. So I think it's going to change our mindset about what professional dressing is.
And I imagine it's going to affect footwear. I mean, I haven't been wearing shoes for 18 months, I feel like, and I was the kind of guy who in my previous career, when I was in New York, I had a closet full of fancy shoes. And, when I moved to Seattle, it basically was just Echoes. And now I'm a little bit embarrassed to admit I'm wearing Crocs under the desk here.
These are all our little secrets, what we wear under the desk, from Uggs to Crocs to flip-flops. I really think we're going to see a major change in the shoe industry. I think there's very few women that are going to go back to towering heels because we've gotten used to walking. And if you notice what's happening with fall trends, there's a lot of lug soles. So shoes that are walking shoes, more comfortable. I don't think you're going to see what New York used to look like with, thin-soled leather shoes and beautiful high polishes. I don't think we're going to have that anymore.
So you talked a little bit about how the pandemic might affect and coming back to work after the pandemic might affect
Mhm.
women's footwear choices. It might affect sort of the fabrics and fit. We're going to see things that are a little bit more comfort focused, a little bit stretchier. What are some of the ways that personal grooming has been affected? I mean, I can tell you, I haven't had a professional haircut in 18 months at this point. I've saved a lot of money and gotten good at using the clippers and two mirrors. But what do you think? How do you think personal grooming is impacted?
I think personal grooming has been really impacted as someone who spent the time to grow my hair out during the pandemic because obviously this color is enhanced. It was quite a shock to see my natural hair. So I immediately went back to color and doing my hair. Now, doing that at home is vastly different than doing it in a salon. So one of the things is that's where YouTube videos come in. Very handy for learning how to do these type things. There is home color, which is a great option if you can't get into a salon. I think men, two mirrors and a pair of scissors can be a dangerous situation. So you want to go slow, and then we want to remember, like, there are a reason why stylists have very sharp scissors. So whatever kitchen scissors you have, not going to do it. So no cutting off the tops of popsicles and then turning around for a haircut.
No, I've got hair. I have hair scissors and I have hair clippers. But the back of my head hasn't been much of an issue because no one other than the people in my household have been seeing it for the last 18 months. So I've had to get a little bit better and bring in some assistance to
Yes.
touch up the back more recently as I've been getting out more. Where would you point our students to look at and find new styles or fashions that are business appropriate? Like, where are you watching the trends?
I'm watching the trends a lot on streetwear to see what the changes are in the business environment. I think it's hard to go to fashion magazines because you're going to see a much more fashion side. I think it's really working with our own characteristics and being mindful about when we feel professional and when we don't. To go for resources, I would really look at the characteristics of the business and how they match with the characteristics of the particular student, whether that's going to be a good fit. But I think everything right now is inspiration, the art, the culture, politics, and it depends on what industry you're in too. Looking for those tips is really important because what we see on TV doesn't necessarily translate to what we see in reality.
Yeah, and the last time we spoke, we did talk a lot about how students should really look at the norms in the companies and industries that they're looking to move into and use those as guidance for the kind of style that they're going to develop for themselves.
Right. And I think it really is a personal thing now where we have to own our style and be mindful of it. And then look at the company that we're looking at. Say something like Boeing is a very linear company. So it would be odd to show up in jeans and a polo and say a hoodie and soft soled shoes. That wouldn't fit with that company profile. But you could show up at just like you could show up at Google in a suit, hard soled shoes, and that would also be a mismatch. So you want to look to the company characteristics as opposed to the individuals within the company for how to measure what you're going to wear with their process.
Since we're seeing a lot of companies continuing with work from home options and hybrid work environments, probably well into 2022, do you have any advice for people who are going to be spending a lot of time on Zoom to look their best on Zoom?
To look your best on Zoom, one of the things is the difference. is that contrasts are going to show more on camera. So you want to minimize too big a contrast. So black and white isn't necessarily great, but you want to add color because it adds interest. You know, if you're doing a big group meeting on Zoom and you're only in a little picture box, it's easy to be overlooked. So you want to make more of a presence by using a little bit more color, a little bit more accessories. And the other thing that's important is to have a little bit snugger fit so the camera can get a clean outline so you're not blending into the background.
Right. So you mentioned contrast not being a great thing. Like houndstooth is probably not having its moment this year.
No.
Um, but having some contrast between you and whatever your background is can help you pop a little bit. So maybe wearing a bolder color if you have, a white or beige background, that sort of thing.
Yes. Like you don't want to blend into your background. You have to have some definition away from it. The other thing too is pattern works well on Zoom and video. So that's something. It's just white that causes the camera to start undulating.
Yeah. You talk about not wanting to blend in with your background. As you can see, I've got a green screen behind me, and I typically use a green screen in my Zoom meetings. And I pulled on a greenish polo, and I was just a floating head. I had to go
That's
change before my meetings. I just didn't even think about it. I've been sort of living in the polos for the last 18 months, and students that I meet with will get to know my collection of UW polo gear. But definitely I hung that green one up and I said, that's for the weekends. Cannot
yes.
use it during the work week.
And I think it's good to make notes. Like if you're wearing a color that you really like on Zoom, make a note on that so you can start remembering what works and what doesn't in this type medium.
So since, we're in terms of accessorizing, we're basically accessorizing from, the waist up and even shoulders up, right? You've got a great bold pair of glasses on. What are some trends in eyewear that you think students should be aware of?
Oh, I think eyewear is such a great option, particularly in Zoom, and also too to make a statement in person. Glasses are getting a little bit bigger. On Zoom, though, you want to be careful about following that trend because a smaller lens will be less reflective. So I anticipate that while glasses are bigger and bolder this year, they're going to be a little smaller and bolder next year.
All right. And
Yeah.
maybe get that if you're getting a new pair of lenses, get that anti-glare, maybe cuts down a little bit on the reflection from your screen showing up in covering up your eyes.
Absolutely. The other thing too, set your lights so that you're not bouncing a lot of glare off the glass frame itself. Things like metals are going to be a little trickier than a resin-based frame, which is a little softer. A matte finish on the frame will also reflect less.
Okay. You mentioned lighting. I know a lot of people probably bought some ring lights during the peak of work from home. I am situated next to a north facing window, so I get some soft natural light coming in, but that's great. But then I have an overhead, recessed can light that puts a little bit of shine off my forehead. Any advice on lighting or for women, perhaps makeup that can help appearance on Zoom?
One of the things that really helps, and I know this seems like such a simple trick, but the thing about lighting is that if you can bounce it, do it. So just take a white piece of paper and place it under your computer. It'll cause the light to bounce and give you a little bit softer light on your face. For women, one of the things is that makeup will read a little bit more, what do I want to say, a little stronger in color on camera. So you make sure that it's like not too much so that it looks overdone, but so little that it doesn't look like there's anything there.
Yeah.
And
So to talk about that white piece of paper idea, that's to provide like a little bit of fill coming up from
yes,
below, right? So you don't have shadows on your face.
correct. That's to give you a little bit of fresher light coming up on your face. A above you too, if you have, like you're saying, you have a can light above you, you want to move your camera and yourself so that the light hopefully is coming behind you so that it actually gives you a break between the background and yourself.
Yeah, to the extent that that's possible. And especially if you're setting up your new space, we have a lot of students who are moving to Seattle to start the year.
Absolutely.
You might want to think about how you set up your space, because what we do know is that many of the job and internship interviews are going to continue to be online. So getting that space set up in anticipation of those virtual interviews is probably a good use of time before things get too busy.
It is. And the other thing too is be prepared if you don't have a designated space to work with just your computer and some off lighting. I'm not a big fan of the ring lighting, particularly because I wear glasses, and what it does is it centers the rings in a reflective way in the center of
Yeah.
my glasses. So for me, side lighting would be better because I can adjust it then so that I can control the reflection.
Yeah, so a task light, aimed
Yes.
at the wall like if you're in a corner aiming at the wall, can bounce that light back on you, and it's a little bit softer and it fills some of those shadows.
Yeah, absolutely. But just be ready, particularly with students, you don't always have a set designated space. So you want to make sure you work through your setup before the interview so everything is seamless.
Yeah, test out the clothing that you're going to wear. If you're putting on makeup for the first time, or not the first time
Call
ever,
me.
but if you're putting on makeup when it's not an everyday thing on Zoom, you might want to test that to make sure that it comes through and gives the appearance that you're hoping to have.
Absolutely. Test, test, test.
I guess the last question I want to ask is, we've seen, I think, a real transition, revolution, if you will, in the shopping experience, right? We're not going
Oh,
into department stores or even specialty boutiques to purchase our clothes. A lot of purchasing probably happening through social media advertising, Facebook and Instagram, maybe some catalog companies. Are there any companies that you think are really provide a great value and high quality clothing for people who are looking for, professional business attire in a wide range, right? So sort of business casual, that people should be aware of?
I would say, there's so many companies online now. I would first off, I'd be cautious about all comers, all newcomers, really check them out. There's a lot of fast fashion out there. I would say, one of my favorites right now that has a lot of great inventory in terms of professional clothing is Macy's. Uniqlo is another company that has been really good and has stepped up. I think right now it is so flexible what the professional look is that it really takes going through all of these different sites because one piece isn't going to make it. You're going to have to build a wardrobe that's cohesive and works for you. So, all of
So
these places are good to look through.
finding the retailer, designer that you like, getting the styles that you like, and then maybe stocking up to that sort of capsule wardrobe where everything works together and you can, pull a top and a bottom out and not worry about, how they match, because they just match.
Because they work together, because
Yeah.
you've been mindful about what you're buying and what you're putting together. Yeah, I really think it takes a broad range now. It's not going to come from one place.
Yeah. So any tips on the actual that sort of online shopping? Like, do you order three sizes because you don't know which one's going to fit, or do you order one and then if it doesn't fit, order a different one? How do you advise your clients to go about that?
Uh, It is a little tricky. One of the things is, once you know your proportions, your color palette, and what your clothing personality is, you're going to be able to look differently at what you see online. The other thing is you want to look at the pictures carefully and say, does this match my body shape? If you're looking at something that's very straight and very linear, you also want to have that body shape so that you can recognize that. Those sizing charts are actually really good information, as well as finding out if they tell you what the height and size that the model is wearing. It gives you a good idea of a baseline to start at. And yes, if you're in between sizes, order both sizes and then send the one that doesn't fit back. The thing is to do it in a timely way, because with all of the online shopping that's going on, shipping has gotten a little bit slower. So I really think it's worth the money to pay to have second day air delivery rather than waiting for the ground shipping, which could count against you in a return.
Right, because you might only have 14 days return period. And if
Mhm.
you don't get it for 13 days, you don't have a lot of time to get it
Oh,
back to them. Yeah. So I know that when I look at clothing online, sometimes it looks like the model isn't actually wearing the clothing. Like it's been a like sort of a Photoshop deal where it's like a photo of the clothing because the model, you see them and they have the same exact expression and everything in the same pose. But right. So should we be looking for companies that are showing the clothing on actual models where you can tell that it's actually being worn by that person and not that it's some type of computer generated example of what the clothing is?
it's tricky now. I will tell you, most retailers are doing that. They are photoshopping on. There's less actual styling being done with the clothing. It's the pandemic has changed a lot of things. It's also affected a lot of supply chains. So retailers are doing what they can do to cope with it, but you will see photoshopped clothing on models. Look at the shape of the clothing rather than the model and see if that's a good line, because you want to look at the outline, which is the silhouette, and then look at how the details are placed on the inside of the garment. And it's going to take some trial and error. So be prepared. But it is a really, really efficient and effective way to shop, because the stores are good too. Get out in the stores and see what they have as well, because they're going to really be the ones that are driving what the trend market is.
All right. Well, I think that you've provided us with some great advice on getting our wardrobes updated and getting ready to re-enter the workplace post pandemic, and what the fashion trends might hold in the near future. I want to thank you, Audrey, for coming on Conversations on Careers and Professional Life again. We'll put a link to your website in the show notes, along with some resources that we have available to students at the Foster School, conversations that we've had in the past, as well as some resources for, figuring out your personal style.
Yeah, it's great, great. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I appreciate the time together.
So we stopped recording, but then we kept talking, and you had some ideas about places to find some high quality but discounted clothing because of this moment that we're in right now with a lot of contraction in the fashion space.
Yes. So right now, really go for like places like Nordstrom's Rack, Neiman Marcus Last Call. Those type sites are going to be the receivers of all this beautiful high-end luxury designer that's going to be discounted probably 80% at least. So what Gregor and I were talking about was polo shirts, and I was saying right now you can get beautiful Brooks Brothers polo shirts that we're selling in the store for $100, which now you can probably pick up for $30, $25. So there's some real deals out there shopping these sale sites. The other thing too, don't forget consignment. There are beautiful pieces. Consignment is a really sustainable foundation with all the beautiful clothes.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that a lot of people stuck at home for the last 18 months decided to go through their closets, clear things out that they weren't wearing or no longer fit. And a lot of that is showing up in consignment shops around town. So that's a great idea, a sustainable option to find some high quality pieces at a discount.
Absolutely. Yes.
All right. Well, thanks so much. I know I'm going to head right over to a couple of these sites and see if I can add some things to my wardrobe for the fall quarter here. Thank you again, Audrey. It is always a pleasure to talk with you and to get ideas about fashion and style.
Thank you, Gregory.
You can learn more about Audrey, the style services that she provides, and read her blog at audreybeaulacstyle.com. And Beaulac is spelled Beaulac. As always, I'll put links in the show notes at conversationsoncareers.com. And don't forget about that survey. Thank you for listening to another episode of Conversations on Careers and Professional Life. I'd love to hear what you think about the podcast. You can email me at gheller@uw.edu. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend or classmate.